Welcome back, our dear viewers. As we said at the beginning of our show, that we are dedicating this episode for the soul of one of our mentors, one of the most distinguished presenters in the Egyptian television, and one of the mentors of most of the presenters here on Nile TV International, Mr. Mohammed Islam. He's one of the pillars of this channel, and we are dedicating this episode to his soul. May he rest in peace, that he passed away a few days ago. And we are very much delighted to have with us today to talk about the late Mohammed Islam, our very dear guest, Ms. Hedayat El-Nabie. She is a very distinguished journalist and the cousin of Mr. Islam. Good morning, Ms.
Good morning, my dear. Thank you very much, Nile TV, for dedicating a whole episode to Mohammed. Mohammed is my cousin, the son of my aunt, the sister of my mother. So we were very close on the personal level, and of course the professional level, because we were in the same field. He was a really remarkable person in all aspects, and he was really dedicated. I mean, he had a talent of the language. The English language was, he mastered it in a way I don't think many people in Egypt have mastered it. God rest his soul in peace.
Indeed. Before talking with Ms. Hedayat about our late Mohammed Islam, we have a voice recording that Mr. Ahmed Fawzi sent us on his colleague, Mr. Mohammed Islam. Ahmed Fawzi is a long-time broadcaster who started his career at a very young age alongside Mohammed Islam. Ahmed went on to work for Madame Jehan Sadat, former First Lady of Egypt, and first as her press secretary, then chief of cabinet, chief of her office for 10 years. Let's have listen now at what Mr. Fawzi has to tell us about Mr. Mohammed Islam.
Hello, and thank you for having me on the program. Mohammed Islam and I got to know each other during the late 60s. We remained friends until his untimely passing last week. Although I left Egypt in 1984, we remained in touch, and we would meet whenever I visited Cairo. At least we would speak on the phone. Mohammed and I started our broadcasting careers together at Radio Cairo, the English language station of Egyptian state radio. We were doing all sorts of things. We were writing, producing, presenting various programs, including musical reviews, talk shows, news and current affairs programs. There was a friendly rivalry between us. We would compete to produce many of Shakespeare's plays, adapting them for radio, and with a group of like-minded friends who loved English literature, we would have a lot of fun acting the various parts. Some of those friends were also colleagues at Radio Cairo. The famous DJ Marwan Hamad, Raouf Hafiz, Yahya Haydar, Tariq Noor, Randa Hafiz, and many others. By the way, those radio plays and short stories are still in the archives of Radio Cairo. Later, we both went on to edit and present the news in English on Egyptian television channel 2. We were very busy young broadcasters in our 20s and 30s. Mohammed Islam had what I call a towering intellect. He was quick-witted and had a great sense of humor. He was eloquent and refined in all his presentations. Mohammed loved Egypt, as we all did, and he had a deep sense of belonging to our ancient land and a strong drive to tell the world about its ancient glories. So in addition to broadcasting, Mohammed began producing and directing films, documentary films about Egyptian culture, Egyptian history, including films about the Cairo Museum, the Coptic Museum. He also produced a documentary showing the Cairo Ballet Troupe dancing among the temples of Karnak. Mohammed will always be remembered for his coverage of the October War in 1973, which he broadcast to the world in his inimitable English accent and sonorous voice. Muhammad had a remarkable presence, both in person and on the air. He was a sensitive man, deep and thoughtful at times, and at others he could be so witty and funny and always intelligent. And although he came from an aristocratic family, being the grandson of Tosun Pasha, Muhammad was very modest and gentle and compassionate with those less fortunate than himself. By the way, Muhammad's career also included a stint at the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and I recall he took a great interest in programs for the eradication of illiteracy among women in the countryside. In fact, if I may be allowed a personal reflection, one of his films traced the work of my mother, Dr. Sumaya Fahmi, who taught young women in the Nile Delta village of Sirsi, Layan, how to read and write. In conclusion, Egypt has lost a broadcasting giant, and I have lost a very good friend. My heart goes out to all his children and to the whole family and to his many friends who, like me, will miss him greatly.
And welcome back. Ms. Hedayat, can you tell us about the career of Mr. Islam? Indeed, he was one of the most distinguished presenters in English language. So can you tell us about his career and his influence on this field in particular, as you are yourself a distinguished journalist?
Thank you, my dear. Muhammad took his education at the English school in Cairo. He was a colleague of Ahmed Fawzi and Marwan Shawkat Hamad and others, of course. They were children together, grew up together, and went to career together. Then he went to Zurich, where he studied at the Polytechnic, and came back to Cairo later on. During his stay in Switzerland, he met his first wife and had his two children, Yasmin and Soraya Islam. And when he came back, he continued his studies at the American University in Cairo. Then he opted for the media and Radio Cairo, the English program. And from there, he went from one stage to another stage. And he had a lot of listeners, and people until today tell me that they do remember his programs.
Indeed.
This is remarkable.
Yes.
And like Ahmed said in his comments, that his coverage of the October War was so important because he spoke to the world in a language they understood. And he was the lead anchor person in Egypt who told the world what was happening and who relayed the victory of Egypt to the world. So this is so important in his career, being the anchor person of the October War.
Indeed. What other programs were quite influential and remarkable from your point of view, Ms. Hedayat, during his career?
I think those that opted for cultural angles were very important because the listener, the foreign listener, especially the foreign listener, because we who are Egyptians, we will not listen to English programs, but the foreigners who are in Egypt and outside Egypt, this was an opener for the country, for them to know Egypt more.
Indeed.
And as also Ahmed mentioned, he had a lot of documentaries. And those
He had a very unique voice.
Oh yes,
And
oh yes,
he was
remarkable
speaking,
voice.
Yes,
Remarkable voice.
It touches your senses in a very
Exactly.
unique way.
No, he was. It was an emotional voice.
Indeed,
also.
yes.
You know, it reflected emotions, ups and downs, and the feelings of a human being.
Yeah.
Also, I think that people who listened to him until today remember some of those programs. It's very strange that one of the Facebook friends wrote that she still remembers the poem he started the program with. unbelievable. I mean, many years have passed, but
Yes.
still people remember.
Yes, indeed. Ms. Hedayat, also when I first joined Nile TV and at the beginning of the channel, the opening of the channel was with the voice of Mr. Islam.
Oh my God.
Indeed, yes.
No, and then, you know, everybody I meet here today tells me something about Muhammad, that he trained them.
Yes,
that
he trained all of us. Myself, I was lucky enough to be trained by Mr.
So
Islam.
unbelievable. He has this kind of tutorship
Yes.
that people don't know about him.
Yeah.
I mean, we, the audience, we know that he's an anchor person, that he covered the October War, that he had documentaries, but we don't know the side which is teaching and learning and giving new generations the... I just want to add a footnote to the personal side
Yes.
of Muhammad, that later on he had a second marriage, and
Yes.
it's still Mrs. Namat Islam is
Yes.
still well and good,
Yes.
and he has from her 2 children, Tosun and Maryam.
Indeed. And to talk more about Mr. Islam, we are joined over the phone by Mr. Marwan Hamid, our radio broadcaster and journalist. Good morning, Mr. Marwan.
Good morning. How are you?
How are you, sir?
My name is Hamad. Hamid is the producer on cinema.
Yes. Mr. Marwan Hamad,
Yes.
can you tell us about your relationship with Mr. Islam and how influential he was as a journalist and presenter in English?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. And it's a bit difficult for me to start or get into the mood to speak about Muhammad Hussein Islam, known to me as Izzy, since maybe over, we're going into the 60 years now. And I was extremely sad to learn of his passing away.
Indeed.
We were in school together in the 50s. We always saw him as the man with the continuous, funny, humorous personality. I cannot recall someone whom he got to know that didn't like him and found his company so extremely enjoyable. He always joked, had lots of interesting stories to tell. Whomever he was with, in other words, one could never be bored with him. He was also known for his being a great gentleman and always had a kind word for anyone and was always ready to help anyone who needed it. To me, he had a very strong mastering of the English language with an extremely unique, powerful voice, always reaching into his listeners. We used to act on stage together even, a lot with different plays like Othello and Hamlet, etc. I remember an encounter with each play.
Yes.
One was when we looked at each other on stage and we didn't know how to react in the play of Hamlet, which he had the role of Hamlet and I was Iago. So when I came out as a ghost after Hamlet murdered me, I was pointing at him as an accuser, so no one could see me, only he. And a person was going around giving out drinks. And although only Islam could actually see me, that person put a drink in my hand. So it was very embarrassing. And immediately, Islam was so quick, he took the glass from my hand and drank it. So he was always there reacting for everybody. The one of Othello was really funny.
Indeed.
As I was asked to come to the Gomorrah Matrah, and I didn't know what it was all about and happening, but coming into the stage from behind, I heard Islam's voice coming out from the other side, and he was shouting loud, and there was a lady singer. I didn't know what was happening, so I said I would surprise them by shouting back, and Islam was trying to cover by shouting even louder when I was shouting. So I had a powerful voice also too, so I thought he was trying to outshout me. I was playing a game, voice game, so I increased the volume even more. Suddenly the door opened and there was the director with Islam, and the director shouted at me, asking me what in hell was I doing? I said, I'm just shouting and singing with my Islam, my good friend. So Islam could not stop laughing, of course, and I realized that he was dressed up as Othello. It was a special audition outside with a big audience. The Vice Minister of Culture was there. So you cannot imagine how embarrassing it was for me. And Islam, again, saved the situation by calming down the director and telling him that I'm his good friend.
Yeah.
Well, we can keep on speaking so
Indeed.
much about this wonderful man.
Yes.
And the last cooperation between Islam and myself was on Radio Cairo with a morning show like you have your breakfast show called Raz
Yes.
Taz. And it was indeed very entertaining. And he was always bringing up great topics, and people were always calling in. And of course, we all know his great participation during the October, already mentioned, and his participation in United Nations programs, and with Ahmed Fawzi and Nader Gohar. Anyhow, Islam was a very knowledgeable person with an intelligent insight on many different matters.
Indeed, may he rest in peace, Mr. Marwan Hamad, our journalist. Thank you very much for being our guest for today and for what you have been just mentioning about our late dear presenter Muhammad Islam. And indeed, as I said, that Mr. Muhammad Islam was the mentor, and he taught mostly most of the presenters here on Nile TV International how to be good presenters and how to present in a proper language. And indeed, he was one of the first to make a promotion for the channel at the start of its launch. And we will be listening now to the promotion of Nile TV International by the voice of Mr. Muhammad Islam.